All right, let's talk about the second week of January 2026. The global economy got hit with three massive shocks that, on the surface, looked totally unrelated. But what if they weren't? Today, we're going to connect the dots and show how these events might just be the birth of a whole new economic order that some people are calling AI feudalism. Let's get into it.
So let's start with shockwave number one. The Federal Reserve, the very foundation of the U.S. economy, suddenly found itself under a criminal probe launched by the executive branch. Now, this was way more than just politics as usual. This was a direct assault on the independence of the Fed, and you better believe global markets noticed immediately.
At the exact same time, over in the tech world, there was this so-called emergency electricity auction to handle the insane power demands of AI. But listen how analysts were describing it. A privately owned, cloud-hosted Gosplan. Gosplan. That was the Central Economic Planning Agency for the Soviet Union. So what they're saying is, this wasn't a free market at work. This was a handful of corporations planning an economy from the top down.
Okay, so with the US government basically at war with itself and big corporations building their own private empires, America's allies started getting really nervous. Canada, one of our closest partners, began making a significant pivot toward China. This wasn't just about trade deals. It was a search for stability in a world that was looking less and less stable.
A political crisis, a corporate power grab, and a fracturing alliance, all in 1 week. So you have to ask the question, what if these aren't three separate stories at all? What if they're all just different chapters of the same, much bigger story? Let's dig in, and we'll start with the chaos back in Washington.
Right, so that pressure cooker in Washington was about to blow its lid. And right at the heart of it was the independence of the Federal Reserve, a core principle that basically underpins the entire global financial system.
And this slide just perfectly captures the standoff. On one side, you've got Fed Chair Jerome Powell trying to do his job, saying, hey, we're setting rates to serve the public. On the other side, you've got the White House demanding he slash rates to make the economy look good for the midterms. And get this, those demands were backed up by the threat of criminal charges. That's something we have literally never seen before. So how did the market react? It was swift and it was brutal. When trust in your core institutions just evaporates, money runs for safety. Investors started dumping the dollar and flooding into hard assets, which sent gold skyrocketing to a record high of over $4,600 an ounce.
And this is the key takeaway right here. This wasn't just political noise for the Sunday talk shows. For the first time ever, global investors had to actually put a price on the risk that the U.S. central bank might not be independent anymore. That alone sent long-term borrowing costs through the roof and raised huge questions about the stability of the entire U.S. financial system. So while Washington was busy tearing itself down, big tech was busy building fortresses. Remember that emergency electricity auction we mentioned? Well, it was sold as a solution to an energy crisis, but what it really was a massive power grab.
The whole thing played out like a masterclass in how to build a monopoly. First, the tech giants signed these enormous 15-year contracts to fund new power plants, something only they could afford to do. That immediately drove up energy costs for everybody else, which squeezed smaller AI startups right out of the market. And who was there to finance it all? The big banks, of course, collecting a nice easy 8% interest on the deals. And the end result was this new digital caste system. You have the haves, the big tech companies, who became the new landlords of the energy grid. And then there's everyone else, from AI startups to your local small business, who became the have-nots, digital tenants forced to rent power from their biggest competitors. You know, with Washington in total chaos and corporations building these giant walled gardens, it's really no surprise that America's closest allies started looking for other options, which brings us to our third story, Canada's pivot away from the US and toward China. And honestly, this chart just says it all. The US had a 100% tariff on Chinese electric vehicles. Canada, they slashed theirs down to just 6%. That's not just a little tweak in trade policy, that is a massive, clear signal that Canada was forging a very different path. And the reason why is summed up perfectly in this quote. Canada wasn't choosing China over the US. It was choosing predictability over loyalty. I mean, think about it. When your biggest, most reliable partner suddenly becomes completely unreliable, you go looking for stability, and you take it wherever you can find it. So let's put it all together. A crisis of trust in government, a corporate power grab creating digital landlords, and America's closest allies looking for the exit sign.
This is where we connect the dots, because these aren't separate events. They are the building blocks of a new economic reality. Analysts are calling it AI feudalism. It's a system where a tiny handful of tech and financial giants control the essential infrastructure of the 21st century: data, computing power, and now even the energy to run it all. And in this new system, the rest of us are basically just tenants, digital serfs, renting the very tools we need to exist from our new corporate overlords. And this slide makes the analogy just chillingly clear. The new land isn't soil. It's data and compute power. The new lords aren't nobles. They're the tech giants and the megabanks. And the peasants? Well, that's pretty much everyone else, from AI startups to gig workers. The new social contract seems to be, you will own nothing, you'll subscribe to everything, and you'll rent your existence from us. This whole feudal structure, it should sound a little familiar. It's really a modern, high-tech twist on a warning that was issued almost a century ago by the economist Friedrich Hayek in his famous book, The Road to Serfdom. See, Hayek warned that centralized economic planning by the government would eventually lead to a loss of freedom. What we're seeing in 2026 is a new kind of central planning, not by the state, but by a private cartel of tech and finance companies. That privately owned, cloud-hosted Gosplan we talked about. And in this new system, the state's role is just to enforce the rules that the cartel sets. It's Hayek's nightmare, but now with GPUs.
So, with all this going on, how are investors reacting? Well, they're hedging their bets. They're buying gold as a safe haven, they're buying defense stocks to profit from all the instability, and they're buying the utility and energy companies that own the essential plumbing of this new feudal economy.
And this brings us to the final unsettling question. This shift to AI feudalism, it's not happening by force. It's happening quietly, disguised as convenience and innovation. The question is, by the time we all realize we're just tenants in a digital world, will the deed have already changed hands for good? That's the question we're all going to be asking. Thanks for tuning in.